On a day like today, the question that Chassidim are asking is, how can we use out the opportunity to deepen our connection to the Rebbe? Today is obviously special in its significance because this is the day that the Rebbe officially, publicly became Rebbe, accepted the position of Rebbe. And for our part, we're looking how to participate in that, how to live up to our side of the bargain. And when the Rebbe started, when the Rebbe spoke, from the very first Farbrengen, Kabbalas HaNesias, the Rebbe made it clear that this is not a one-way street. This is not a unilateral thing where Chassidim will place upon the Rebbe the responsibility and we're going to get off easy. The Rebbe made it very clear from the start that this is a two-way street and that Chassidim have their job and they have their work cut out for them. If we talk about it or we think about it in historical terms, der Shvi, and like the Rebbe said in the Maimer Basilagani, that der Shvi is Shvi to the Rishon, that being the seventh means the seventh of something. In other words, that the Rebbe's generation is the culmination and the ultimate expression of the system established by the Alter Rebbe. We are living in a time where something that was started 7 generations ago has come to its climax, has come to its completion, which the Rebbe outlines very clearly in the Maimer, the parallel to Moshe Rabbeinu's generation, compared to Avram Avinu. Avram started it, Moshe finished it, and that we're here to finish the job. What job? The job started by the Alter Rebbe, who started Chabad. So what is Chabad? We know that the Maggid, the Mezritcher Maggid, was the chief disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov had 60 students, Shishim Gebeirim Soviv Lo, 60, and that the Maggid was Pishnayim. He had 120 Talmidim, obviously had many, many followers and adherents, but 120 official students, people who made the cut, who were officially accepted to be students. We know that even those who were not even officially students were on an extremely high level, those who would stoke the ovens in the study hall. And they themselves were on an extremely high level. And of these 120 official students, we have the great fathers of all the great Hasidic dynasties. And they were all tzaddikim. Levi Yitzchak Berditchever, and you had the brothers Elimelech and Evzusha, and the Balaflo, Reb Shmelke. I mean, every one of them giants. And each one of them, each one of the 120, had his own approach, his own style of conveying Teres Baal Shem Tov. But if you were to paint with a broad brush and categorize these 120 different approaches into 2 basic different approaches, 2 different styles, basically, to oversimplify a bit, you had in one category the Alter Rebbe's Chabad approach, and in the other category, everybody else. The other Talmidim said, they attested to the fact that the Alter Rebbe was the only Talmid who heard an entire Torah of the Maggid. Why was he the only one who heard an entire Torah? They weren't listening. Chas v'sholom. They weren't paying attention. They weren't there. No, fakert. To the contrary. Because of their incredibly high level, when they would hear the Maggid teach, it would put them in a state of rapture, and each one would get as far as he could get before he would experience some sort of a otherworldly experience, and that was it. And his style, his approach was Chabad, Mayach Shalat Alalev. He would not allow the hispilus, he would not allow the excitement or the inspiration to carry him away. He'd stay focused, from the beginning of the teaching to its end. So from the very beginning, Chabad was, like its name indicates, intellectualism, as opposed to the other approach, emotionalism. Now, what's the difference between intellectualism and emotionalism? Have you ever been in a situation where, and maybe it happened when you were a kid more often, but even with adults it could happen sometime, where everybody's excited, you don't know what it is that's exciting, you don't know why, but excitement itself is exciting, so you get excited. Basically, that's a description of summer camp, right? And that's the great thing about emotionalism, is you don't have to work for it, you don't have to earn it, you don't have to prepare for it. All you have to where, and maybe it happened when you were a kid more often, but even with adults it could happen sometime, where everybody's excited, you don't know what it is that's exciting, you don't know why, but excitement itself is exciting, so you get excited. Basically, that's a description of summer camp, right? And that's the great thing about emotionalism, is you don't have to work for it, you don't have to earn it, you don't have to prepare for it. All you have to do is be willing of excitement, of inspiration. No preparation. And what it does for you, it takes you to a place that you can't reach on your own. So you're in an exciting environment, a place where everyone is excited about holy things. Everyone's excited about being Jewish. Everyone's excited about doing Hashem's will. And at that moment, you are on a higher level of commitment and clarity and devotion than you can get on your own. And it's a very pleasant experience, a very holy experience. That's the benefit of emotionalism. What's the obvious drawback? Well, when it's over. What are you left with when it's over? See, emotionalism is a vehicle, and yeah, it takes you where you can't get on your own. That's the benefit. What's the drawback? You can't get there on your own. So once it's over, you're left dependent, waiting for the next opportunity to be lifted up. In fact, in English, the way we speak, actually, we have an idiom which is actually extremely accurate, al pi chassidus. When we talk about emotionalism, we tell somebody, come on, get into it. Get into it. And that's accurate. You get into it. It's a vehicle. It takes you somewhere. Anything that comes easy and quick, you lose. If your approach to Hasidism is an emotionalistic approach, basically what that means is it's an approach of dependence. You have to place yourself squarely within the root of inspiration and excitement. And if you wander too far from there, you will lose your excitement. In fact, you will lose your clarity. And worst case scenario, you'll become excited about something else. You'll get into whatever is exciting elsewhere. So you have to keep yourself very, very close to the source of holy excitement. Intellectualism, on the other hand, is the absolute opposite. Like, have you ever been in a situation where somebody's explaining an idea, and they're passionate about the idea, but you don't understand the idea? And not only is their passion not contagious, but it's off-putting. Please do not say that you're in that situation right now. Because intellectualism works the exact opposite. Intellect, in fact, we say it in English. We say, we want to make the emotions, we say, get into it. You get it. Did it go into you? Panemius. Chabad mont panemius. That's what that means. Chabad mont panemius doesn't mean there's this special exclusive club called Chabad. But before you come in, they check and they make sure you have panemius. And if you don't have panemius, Chabad mont panemius, you can't come in. That's not what it means. It means inherently the definition of Chabad, mont panemius. It is synonymous with panemius. In other words, you can just get swept away with an emotion. That's genuine excitement. But you can't fake knowing something. You either have intellect, that you have to work for it, you have to prepare for it. What's the advantage? The advantage is the opposite of the disadvantage of emotionalism. The advantage of intellect is once you do have it, well, now you can go anywhere. It's yours. Not only it's yours, it's you. You are koine that information. Or like it talks about in Tanya and Perek Hey, that Torah is like mazain. Why is Torah like mazain? You know, when you eat something, it stays with you for a while, sometimes longer than you would like it to. You have proof for a long time that you ate well many days or weeks ago. Torah is the same way. Torah is a mitzvah, that's true, so it's a levush. So while you're oisik in Torah, you're spending your time productively and you're staying out of trouble, and it has that milah like any mitzvah. But Torah has an additional benefit, which is not just the hour that I spent learning Torah was an hour well spent. It's more than that, because it's mazain, it's nourishment. The hour I spent learning Torah now gets into me, changes me, rewires my brain, and now it has changed how I will experience everything else after the hour is over. I can never think the same way again. There were a couple of Bachrim in New York on Mivtzayim, and they asked the guy, "Excuse me, sir, would you like to put on tefillin?" He said, "You guys are from Chabad? Get away from me." They said, "Excuse me, what do you know about Chabad?" He says, "I know plenty. I learned in Chabad." They said, uh-oh, what did they do to you? You know, how did they traumatize you? The guy says, "Look, my parents sent me to a Lubavitcher school when I was a teenager, and I'm not observant today. I do what I want. But because of the stuff they taught me in Chabad, I can never truly enjoy it." See, that's the difference between emotionalism and intellectualism. You can get somebody excited and inspired about something, but it's very easy to shake it loose. So forget about 20, 30, 40 years later. But even a minute later, you go into another environment where something else is attractive and something else is exciting, and you totally change your loyalty like that. But intellectualism, when you implant a way of thinking, very hard to unknow what you know. It's very hard when it gets into a panemius and it changes the way you experience reality. That's going to stick with you. So this goes back to the very beginning of Chabad, that the Alter Rebbe was all about Chabad, like the name indicates, which means intellect instead of inspiration, instead of emotion. The other thing that the Alter Rebbe said, which differed from the other Talmidei HaMaggid, was the role of a Rebbe. Tzadik b'Manasseh Yechaya, Tzadik b'Manasseh Yichya. I'm sure we're semi-familiar with the history of that, but in a very short synopsis, basically the Alter Rebbe's approach, his understanding of Teres Baal Shem Tov, was that the Rebbe's role is to teach you, to guide you, to empower you, to give you tools, but you have to do the work. And the other tzaddikim, their understanding was the Rebbe does the work, and if you stay close to him, you'll get swept up, you'll get lifted in that. Now, I want to ask you a question in a true Chabad style, because I'm trying to be an educational speaker and not an inspirational speaker. You know what an inspirational speaker, by the way, is? An inspirational speaker is, if you give me an hour of your time, I will give you an hour of entertainment. And because you brought me here for a Jewish event, it's kosher entertainment. So no guilt. You spent an hour having fun, hearing stories and jokes, and no one has to feel guilty about it. That's inspiration. You know what education is? Education is you make the audience work. You make them think. And after it's over, they're not even sure if they liked it. See, the inspirational speaker, they're sure they liked it. In fact, you ask, how was the speaker? It was great. It was so inspiring. What did he talk about? I don't know. It was really inspiring. The educational speaker is, what did he speak about? I can tell you what he spoke about. I don't even know if I agree with the guy. I kind of didn't like him. But a year later, 2 years later, however long later, and you start to develop it, and you start to unpack it, and you have your own insight. That's an educational speaker. So, Bechlal, if you give a Chabad speaker an hour, he's mechuyev to give you 100 hours, 1,000 hours. If you're just entertaining someone, so you give them an hour, they give you back an hour. But if you're planting seeds, if you're actually giving information, then the whole point of that information is, when does it really take off? Once you get it and you run with it and you do your own thing with it. So really, the hour that you spend listening, by the way, I'm not committing that I have to speak an hour. Just don't get nervous, by the way. If I finish my point in 30 minutes, I can stop then too. Hour is an arbitrary example. But if you give somebody an hour of information, where are you going to really see the impact? Not during the hour. You're going to see it a month from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, as they unpack the information and make it their own and apply it to their way of looking at life. So I'm going to ask you a question in a true style of Chabad. We said that the Alter Rebbe, going back to the very beginning of Chabad, there were two distinct qualities of the Alter Rebbe's approach that distinguished it from all the other Hasidic approaches. One is the idea of information and education as opposed to emotions and inspiration. That was one concept. So far, so good? Yeah? The other idea was the role of the Rebbe. Tzadik Mimona say, Yichaya, does he do the work for you? Or Tzadik Mimona say, Yichya, he gives you the tools to do the work yourself. Do you see, can you see, how that is one Nakuda? That's one concept. Yeah, a little bit. Emotionalism, by definition, fosters what? Dependence or independence? Dependence. But intellect, when you educate someone, that fosters independence. So a Chabad Rebbe fosters the independence of his Chassidim. A Chabad Rebbe develops Chassidim who are leaders, who are critical thinkers, who are creative, who are self-starters. And the biggest proof of a Chabad Chassid is not only is he able to motivate himself, but he's able to motivate others, right? If you can't convey it, then you might not have it yourself. Or like the Hayemim from Daled Tammuz says, and I think it's telling that it's the day after Gimel Tammuz, a chosid machta sviva. You know, there's a thermometer and there's a thermostat. Two different types of personalities. A thermometer tells you what's the temperature in the room. A thermostat tells the room the temperature. So emotionalism is being a thermometer. If I'm in a place where there's excitement about Yiddishkeit, I'm excited about Yiddishkeit. I'm a thermometer. Now you put me out in the cold, my mercury is going to drop. What can I do? I'm a thermometer. That's emotionalism. Chabad is, I'm a thermostat. Put me in a cold room and I'm going to warm it up. Why? Because I'm not dependent, I'm not reactive, I'm proactive. Why? Because what the Rebbe gave me is pneumius. I took ownership. It's mine. Not only it's mine, it's me. It's who I am. And wherever you go, there you are. So a Chabad Chassid is one who's able to go out over the whole world. And that's why in the rest of the whole Chassidic world, who's close to the Rebbe? One who is close to Begashmias. In the Chabad, we're very funny. Who is close? One who is far Begashmias. And the farther you go, if you go to Antarctica, then you're really a Chassid. So how does this apply to Yud Shvat? Like I told you, the Shvi is the culmination, is the climax of the Rishon. That the Rebbe took the Alter Rebbe's unique approach and put it into hyperdrive. Everything that was always quintessentially Chabad, the Rebbe took that and put it up incomparably, infinitely, more intensely. They're telling me to move over, but the cord only goes so far. By the way, when I started, this was in the frame, and now this is in the frame. So, go back. Okay. All right. No problem. So I'm going to tell you a story that I originally heard from Rabbi Lou secondhand. And it was good when I heard it secondhand. But it was even better when I heard it firsthand. And I actually told Rabbi Lou that I eventually heard it firsthand. Last summer, it was Gimel Tammuz actually, I was in South Africa. And we were in Cape Town, we were in Johannesburg. The chief rabbi of South Africa made an event there. And there were a number of speakers. I think I was the token Lubavitcher. They didn't say that, but I think that's what I was there for. And another speaker there was Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb. Now, I was in Cape Town for Gimel Tammuz, and I had the Farbrengen with somebody. So I said, Reb Heshi, please, Farbrengen with me, and you know what I want to hear. He said, yeah, I know what you want to hear. So he told me his story. Which story? The story that I wanted to hear. He knew what I meant. When he was a young man, he lived in Crown Heights. Actually, his wife's family is from Crown Heights, the Majitzer Rebbeim. And they had a Beis Medrash in Crown Heights, so they were living in Crown Heights. He had been to a couple of Farbrengens. That was the extent of his relationship with the Rebbe, but he'd been to a couple of Farbrengens, so he'd heard the Rebbe speak. He never wrote to the Rebbe. He never had Yechidus. This was long before dollars. So the extent of his relationship was that he had attended a couple of Farbrengens. He and his wife moved to Silver Spring, Maryland, where he was working as a psychologist during the day. And then he also, being a Rav, was giving high-level Gemara Shiurim for some of the more advanced Balabatim in Shul. So he was very, very respected, being a professional and being a Talmid Chacham. And everyone came to him for all their questions, and he gave them all the answers. And the problem when you are the answer guy, and you have everybody's solution, what do you do when you are confused yourself? So he said, and he told me this, that it caused him depression. He was very, very lost. And he had no one to turn to. And his questions were serious questions. Questions about being a father, questions about being a husband, some basic questions in Yiddishkeit that, a Talmid Chacham is not even allowed to have these questions. Questions in Emunah, right? So he couldn't even turn to anyone. And he confessed to a friend of his who he respected, who was actually a Lubavitcher nuclear physicist. And the friend said, why didn't you ask the Rebbe? So not knowing any better, he just looked up the phone number for 770. He called up. He didn't understand about an appointment, about Yechidus. He just called up. And Rabbi Chadakov answered the phone. So Rabbi Chadakov asks him, Wer redt? Who's speaking? Now the whole purpose of his call was he wanted to remain anonymous. He was embarrassed about the nature of his questions. And, after all, being such a high-profile person who is known for his clarity, and now he's calling up admitting that he's all messed up. So when Rabbi Chadakov said, Wer redt? Rabbi Weinreb said, he just left it anonymous, he said, a Yid von Maryland, a Jew from Maryland. That's it, he wouldn't say his name. So Rabbi Chadakov asked him, what are you calling about? And he said, I have some questions. What are the questions? And he proceeded to explain what was on his heart, what was troubling him. And with each question, Rabbi Chadakov would repeat the question out loud. And he realized that this was sort of like a human speakerphone. That what was happening is the Rebbe was in the room, and the Rabbi Chadakov was repeating the questions out loud so that the Rebbe should hear it. And then when he was all done, he hears Rabbi Chadakov speaking to the Rebbe, and he hears the Rebbe's voice, and he recognizes the Rebbe's voice. Because after all, like we said, he'd been to a couple of Farbrengens. And he hears the Rebbe's voice in the background, telling Rabbi Chadakov, Azevi ruft von Maryland, sag ihm, als da in Maryland, der Jid mit wem soll reden, und heißt Weinreb. Since he's calling from Maryland, tell him there's a Jew in Maryland he should speak to, and his name is Weinreb. So Rabbi Chadakov repeats this, and Rabbi Weinreb says, Ich bin der Weinreb. I am that Weinreb. Rabbi Chadukov says, hold on. He starts speaking to the Rebbe again, and the Rebbe says, and Weinreb hears this, Ebezei soll wissen sein, als amol darf man reden zu sich. So Rabbi Chadukov asked Weinreb, did you hear what the Rebbe said? And he said, no. He heard it, but he couldn't believe it. He said, the Rebbe said, sometimes you got to speak to yourself. Amol darf man reden zu sich. Sometimes you got to speak to yourself. Now, if you would ask me, what is, just me, personally, like, why do I like that story? I mean, I obviously like it. I'm telling it to you. So is it Ruach HaKodesh? Is there something otherworldly there? Is there? And honestly, I don't know. Maybe there is. If there is, that's inspiring. But it's not necessarily educational. In other words, there's nothing I can do about it. I don't have Ruach HaKodesh. That's why, Bechlal, emphasizing miracles is more of a Chagas thing than a Chabad thing. What's the moral of the story? I don't know. The Rebbe didn't say the moral of the story, but, I have a brain, I'm allowed to think, and I'm allowed to think about what empowers me, what makes me feel like I can apply this story to myself. And so I did some thinking, and I'll tell you what I thought of. If I were in that position, in other words, if I were in the Rebbe's position, and I had told somebody, talk to Weinreb, he's got clarity, and then I found out that you, the confused guy who just called me, are Weinreb, you know what I would do? I would backtrack so fast. Oh, you're Weinreb? Forget what I said. Do not talk to Weinreb. He's a confused guy. He's not going to help you. The Rebbe hears that Weinreb is Weinreb, and he does not back down. Hear this. You're Weinreb? I'm not changing my opinion of you. I know that you do have clarity. I know that you are wise, and I know that you do answer questions. You're calling me as the confused Weinreb? That's fine. Let that Weinreb talk to this Weinreb and sort it out. I'm not scared of the fact that you're confused. I'm not intimidated by the fact that you have questions. I haven't lost an ounce of faith in you because you admitted that not everything in life is 100% clear to you. You want to figure it out? You can figure it out. Amol darf man reden zu sich. And you know what Weinreb told me? He's far from a chassid, at least in the official definition. But you know what he told me on that Gimel Tammuz in Cape Town? He said that till this day, when he finds himself confused and he can't solve a problem, he will put the problem aside, he'll open up Lekutei Sichos, and he'll learn. It doesn't matter what the Sicha is about. The point is, he'll learn. And he'll start to get into that mode of thinking, into the Rebbe's plane of thinking. And after he's finished learning, he finds that clarity in himself. That's what a Chabad Rebbe does for a chassid. A Chabad Rebbe educates and empowers. A Chabad Rebbe shows you how powerful you are by showing you how smart you are. Not by inspiring you, doing it for you, but by putting the onus back on you. You can figure it out. I'm giving you the tools. See, Weinreb is smart. He uses the tools. What are the tools? Lekutei Sichos is the tools. My morim, Igros. Igros, by the way, is one of the most best-kept secrets in Lubavitch. Igros will teach you how the Rebbe approaches day-to-day issues. With a mimer, it's harder to translate it because it's speaking in In Yonim Ruchniim, and you have to figure out how it applies to your life. You learn the Igros, you study the Rebbe's letters, you get an approach to day-to-day issues, an approach to life. There's a letter, speaking of Igros, and it makes the same point as the Weinreb story. There's a letter in Igros, it's from the summer of 1974, from Tafshin Lamed Daled. I think the date is Tezvav Tammuz, if I'm not mistaken. At any rate, the Rebbe is writing to a chassid, a shliach, Reb Moshe Yitzchok Hecht. And from the letter, it's apparent that he is having difficulties in his shlichus. I found out later, more of the inside story, that he had actually sent the keys to the building to the Rebbe and said that he's done. So it wasn't a joke. It wasn't stam, a cry for help like, boy who cried wolf. It was a serious thing. He sent the keys to the building. He had a school in New Haven, Connecticut. And the Rebbe's response is printed in the Igros with the name. I'm not sharing any secrets here. And the Rebbe writes back and says like this. First thing the Rebbe says is, Terem yikro v'ani kvar ene. Before they call out, I have already replied. Okay? So you're writing to me. You're expressing your pain and your desperation. I already took care of the problem, the Rebbe says. It's already solved. The Rebbe proceeds and says, he writes to me and he says he cannot go on and he needs the Rebbe to do it all. He should know that I've already taken care of it and the Moshe Yitzchak Hecht has been sent to New Haven. Now, who's writing the letter? Moshe Yitzchak Hecht. And the Rebbe is writing back, and he's saying, don't worry, I hear it, problem's been already solved, Moshe Yitzchak Hecht has been sent to New Haven. He is Moshe Yitzchak Hecht. So with the Weinreb story, you can guess whether, is Weinreb. This is, you're writing to Moshe Yitzchak Hecht and telling him, good news, I sent, the cavalry's on the way, I sent Moshe Yitzchak Hecht. And the Rebbe continues. It says, the problem is, the problem is you don't know him and his powers. That's why my best advice is that the two should meet. They should get to know each other, and you'll see all of your problems have been taken care of. Telling you guys stories from England is like bringing coals to Newcastle, or in this case, London stories to London. But I think also illustrative of this concept is what Jonathan Sachs said, that the Rebbe changed my life without saying or writing a single word. How so? I wrote to him a question, should I become the next chief rabbi of Great Britain? So the Rebbe takes the paper and he circles the word should, he circles the word I, he makes arrows transposing them, takes the crooked part of the question mark and slashes it out, leaving the little dot below as a period, sends the letter back, and it now reads, I should become the next chief rabbi of Great Britain. Siddim used to say a parable about what is it to go to the Rebbe. That there was a Yid, Rabbi Yankel, and he lived in Krakow in Poland, and his whole life he had a recurring dream. And in this dream, he would picture himself going to the capital, going to the big city of Prague. And in Prague, he would go to the royal district, and he would go to the palace. And in front of the palace, there was a moat, and there was a bridge. And he would dig under the bridge, and he'd find a treasure. So his whole life, he has this dream every single night. And he's becoming an old man. He decides he has to check it out. So he takes his whole life savings, and he makes the trip. It's expensive, and it's grueling, and it takes him weeks to get there. And finally, he shows up. And he's digging under the bridge, and it looks just like the bridge in his dream every single night of his life. There's the palace, there's the moat, there's the river. And he's digging, and the guard, the non-Jew, comes over and says, what are you doing? So he decides, it's crazy, I'm just going to, honesty is the best policy. I'm just going to tell him the crazy truth. So Rabbi Yankel says to the guard, look, I'm just telling you the truth. Every night of my life, I have this recurring dream. I dream, see, I'm from Krakow. I've never been to Prague, but I dream of Prague, and I'm coming here, and I see the palace. It looks just like the palace, and I see the moat, and I see the bridge, and I take my shovel, and I dig, And I see this every night of my life, and this is where I dig, and then I find my treasure, and I become rich. So the guard says, you fool, if everyone were like you, do you know where I would be? Every night of my life, I have a dream. I dream that I'm in Krakow, Poland, a city where I've never been. And in Krakow, I'm in the Jewish quarter where I assure you I would never step foot. And in the Jewish quarter, I'm in a particular house, and he describes the house. And within the house, there's an oven, and I push aside the oven. There's a loose floorboard. I lift up the floorboard, and under the floorboard, there's a bunch of gold, and I become rich. You don't see me going to Krakow, going to the Jewish quarter, going to that house, pushing aside the oven, lifting up the floorboard, and finding a treasure, do you? And at that moment, Rabbi Yankel says, I think I forgot something at home. This is the idea of going to the Rebbe. It says in Perek Beis of Tanya that what's a neshama? A chelik elikami mal mamish. Whose neshama? Your neshama, my neshama, every neshama. That's across the board. Every neshama is from Chochmah Ilah, which means the highest level of the highest world, one with Hashem. But then the Perek goes on and says, but then there are high neshamas and there are low neshamas d'Atzilus and Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. And then how do you connect to your source? You find the neshama d'Atzilus. What does a neshama d'Atzilus mean? In Atzilus, Alakus is bepshitus and Welt is behischadshus. What does that mean? See, in this world, physicality is concrete. It doesn't need any proof. You don't have to prove to me that there's a physical world. I take it for granted. It's a given. It's an axiom. Elokus is an abstract idea. I need philosophy to wrap my head around it. That's this world. In Atzilus, it's the exact opposite. In Atzilus, the notion of a creator who is everything and who is all, that's concrete. That's undeniable. You open your eyes and that's what you see. The idea of a created reality, that's wild. You have to use philosophy to even imagine such a thing. That's how they see it in Atzilus. So neshamas d'Atzilus, what does it mean? We're all neshamas d'Atzilus. Neshamas d'Atzilus means a neshama that comes to this world and still retains the vantage point of Atzilus. That even in this world, he understands that Elokus is concrete and created reality is tentative. So you go and you connect to this neshama d'Atzilus, and that connects you back to your source. But if I'm I'm asking a question in Pshat from Perek Beis of Tanya. If I'm a neshama d'Atzilus, which that's the beginning of the Perek, we're all a chelik elikami mamash, we're all from Chochmah d'Atzilus, Chochmah Ilah, then why do I need somebody else? By the way, this is one of the questions about why going to a Rebbe is not a mamutza. If you think the Rebbe is somebody else, then first of all, it is a mamutza, and second of all, you lost the whole point. The Rebbe is not somebody else besides you. The Rebbe is the real you. You are also in the neshama d'Atzilus. Just something happened that by the time your body received your soul, there was wear and tear, and you lost that vantage point. You lost that clarity. But the clarity is still within you. The clarity is still you. How do you get it back? By going back to your true self. Again, I'm not going to tell you all the London stories. But Freddie Hager said that when he was 21 years old and he went to the Rebbe at 2:30 in the morning and he had Yechidus, he said he walked into the Rebbe's room and the first thing that struck him is that he felt that the Rebbe wanted to see him. Not that I'm waiting to see the Rebbe. That was the truth. He was waiting to see the Rebbe, but once he walked in the room, he felt the opposite feeling. Once I walked in the room, it was like the Rebbe was waiting to see me. I wasn't there to see him all of a sudden. He was there to see me. And then what became clear to me? So Freddie Hager says, they prepared me for my encounter with the Rebbe, telling me I was going to meet a great man, but I left realizing that I had met my true self. It's an incredible concept. I went to the Rebbe to meet my true self. I went to the Rebbe to dig for my treasure in Prague, only to be told that it's under the floorboards in Krakow. But until I have an open, conscious relationship with the Rebbe, I don't know where my treasure is. It's mine, it's me, but I don't know where it is. This is something, by the way, that the Rebbe himself said very clearly. There's a story that Zalman Schachter, when he was a Hillel rabbi in Canada, University of Manitoba in Winnipeg. So he brought a bunch of college kids to 770. And one of the college kids didn't realize he was being disrespectful. And he said to the Rebbe in these words and in this tone, he said, "What's the Rebbe good for?" So Zalman said that he was about to jump into a pit. He just felt mortified. But the Rebbe took it in stride. And the Rebbe said, I can't speak about myself, but I can speak about my Rebbe, about my father-in-law. He tells this college kid, what's a Rebbe good for? A Rebbe is a soul geologist. What's a soul geologist? There's treasure in the earth, natural resources. It's there. But you need an expert. He's called a geologist, and he knows what to dig for, and he knows where to dig. It's the same thing. Every Jew comes in here with a treasure. He is a treasure. But you need a soul geologist to know what to dig for and where to dig. When we meet the Rebbe, we meet our own infinity. We meet our own godliness. So a person who has confusion finds clarity. A person who has questions finds answers. Ultimately, he finds his true self. But how is he directed toward his true self? Not by inspiration. You can do it, you're great. Encouragement. But by education, by information, by the Rebbe giving you a new way of looking at the problem. The Rebbe spent more time on education than anything else. Farbrengens, answering letters, editing publications, teaching people Torah. And contrary to the popular misconception, the Rebbe never told anybody what to think. The Rebbe taught people how to think. And the greatest proof that you know how to think is that you become a creative problem solver. That you can tackle problems that you weren't told how to deal with explicitly. This is what the Rebbe explains about the idea that a person doesn't understand his Rebbe for 40 years. So the Rebbe spoke about the idea, first of all, like koi inish. A person literally doesn't stand up. Standing up means that not only can he tell you what the Rebbe said, but he's absorbed it, that he's standing up. He became a Talmud. He has it. This is his worldview. In other words, when he tells you what the Rebbe said, he's not quoting. Friends of Chabad can quote the Rebbe. A Chassid doesn't quote the Rebbe. A Chassid thinks like the Rebbe. So if you ask the Chassid, that's what the Rebbe said, what's your opinion? You know what the honest answer is? It's also my opinion. That's a Chassid. See, Kabbalah Soil is very nice when you're not yet holding there intellectually, emotionally, you're not congruent with it. So you say, all right, if I can't hold there intellectually and emotionally, at least I'll hold there on a behavioral level. I'll do it without feeling it, without understanding it. And that's what we have to do sometimes to force ourselves to do when we don't have any other option. But that's not the ultimate. Let's not turn that into the goal. The goal isn't to see how much stuff can we do without feeling it or understanding it. It's not a goal to see how much you can force yourself to do without feeling, without understanding. The goal of a chassid, a Chabad chassid, is to see how much can I feel and understand. It's like Nasa v'nishma. The Yidden told the Eibush the Nasa v'nishma, which basically means we don't need an explanation, we're ready to commit to it without an explanation. But if that's all it means, then they should have just said Nasa and leave it at that. Nasa, period. We'll do it. No, you don't have to explain it to us before, and you don't have to explain it to us after. We believe you. But that's not what we said. We said Nasa v'nishma. And we were given 2 crowns for that. There's something about the nishma. Nishma's funny. Nishma can go 2 opposite ways. If you say nishma v'nasa, then nishma is the worst thing. It's basically saying, convince me. Let me hear why you want it, and then maybe I'll do it. Then it's the worst thing. So just plain nasa is better than that. But you know what's even better than just plain nasa? Nasa v'nishma. Well, if nishma started off as being something bad, how did it become something so great? It all depends on the order. You know, like it says in Likutei Torah, that barzel, you can't have iron in the Beis Hamikdash to cut the stones because it brings, it shortens life, and the stones are to bring kapara to lengthen life. And barzel is the Rosh Tevis of the Emois, of Vila Rachel Zilpa Leah. So the question is, well, the Emois, that's the holiest thing you can have. Well, why is that something negative? You know what the answer is? It's in the wrong order. It's the wrong order. Rachel's coming before Leah, and Bilhah's coming before Rachel. The whole thing's messed up. If you tell Hashem, first I want to understand it, then I'll do it. So that's obviously not good. But if you tell Hashem, look, I don't need to ever understand it, I'm going to do it. That's also not the best. Imagine a husband would tell a wife, look, I know you want to explain this to me, but please, I don't have a head for it. What do you care as long as I do it? By the way, guys, that goes in the category, do not try this at home. Do not even say it as a joke. Don't even repeat those words that you heard it at a Farbrengen tonight. It's the worst thing you could say. Rather, what should you say? I don't need to hear about it. I don't need to understand it in order to do it. I'm convinced. If it's important to you, it's important to me because you are important to me. But I can't leave it at that. I want more than that. It's not enough for me to give you my behaviors, to have Kabbalah's oil on the level of nefesh. I want a deeper relationship. I want to have a commitment on the level of ruach, emotions, and neshama, seichel. So nishma means, don't convince me to do it, because I'm convinced already. You got it already. Nishma, when it's after the nasa, means, Rebbe, it's not enough for me to do what you want. I want to feel how you feel and think how you think. A complete chassid says, I want to be totally congruent with the Rebbe. So when I'm not feeling it and I'm not thinking it, okay, that's why I have Kabbalah soil to force yourself to do it. But the goal is actually a higher form of Kabbalah soil. Really, this is the highest form of Kabbalah soil. It's not enough to make my behaviors conform to the Rebbe's will. I want my emotions and my brain to conform to the Rebbe's will. You're going to say, how can a chassid ever even dare to dream of such a goal? But I'm telling you, this is what the Rebbe said. Koi, first of all, means he stands up. You got it. You took ownership of it. It's yours. It's the way you think. And it's not dei oisav, it's dai toi. The Rebbe is medayik in this lashon. What's the difference between a deya and das? What's a deya? Like a deya zagar. Someone who says his opinion. A deya is an opinion. So somebody who can tell you, what was the Rebbe's opinion on land for peace? So you say, no problem, I could tell you the sources, these Farbrengens, these sichos, this is the Rebbe's official opinion on land for peace. That's the deya of the Rebbe. What's the das of the Rebbe? That becomes your way of thinking as well. Let's just use land for peace as an example. That's something that the Rebbe could have come out with and said, Gzera Gezarti. Chevra, trust me on this, it's not a good idea, I'm not explaining it. And everyone would have been fine with that. So then why did the Rebbe spend literally hundreds of hours explaining milsa b'taima why it's not a good idea? It's the same reason, why did the Rebbe spend hundreds of hours, maybe thousands of hours, on Rashi Sichas? What's the idea of a Rashi Sicha? The Rebbe was teaching a methodology how to look at Chumash Rashi. To the extent that the Rebbe would actually complain, and I'll use the word complain, why aren't the Chassidim writing their own ha'aras? Like, I taught this klal, I taught this principle, and when Rashi does this, then you should ask this, and nobody's asking these questions and writing their own scholarly articles. In other words, the Rebbe was basically saying, this isn't for your entertainment. The Rashi Sikha is not to amaze you at my scholarship. The Rashi Sikha is to teach you and empower you to become someone who looks at Rashi this way. And the same thing with every concept that the Rebbe dealt with Shalom Bayis and with Chinuch, and how to learn Rashi, how to learn Rambam. We mentioned land for peace. Every issue, the Rebbe didn't just say, here's Pshat. The Rebbe said, and here's how I arrive at the answer, because I'm trying to empower you that you should think this way as well. In other words, we hear a lot about when people talk about their encounter with the Rebbe, they talk about looking into the Rebbe's eyes. Looking at the Rebbe's eyes. You know what the Rebbe wrote right after Yud Shvat Tafshin Yud? The Rebbe wrote a letter. I believe Rosh Chodesh Adar. He wrote a letter to Anash, explaining to them the derech, how to go forward now after Yud Shvat, after the Histalkos. And the Rebbe was writing mostly to Chassidim who had seen the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he wrote, Geidel atshukal is kashas eina yochel asbia, rak kasher lemid maimorich sidis asher amo harav v'kesiv. The intense yearning to be connected to the Rebbe cannot be satiated in any other way than learning the Rebbe's Chassidus. And then there's the end of the sentence, Ki riyas ponim bilvad, because seeing his face alone is not enough. Not enough. In other words, when the Rebbe is saying his kashrus is through limud Torah, that's not a b'diavad that, he didn't see the Rebbe, so the next best thing is learn from the Rebbe's Torah. The Rebbe says, beferish, I'm talking to people who did see the Rebbe, and I'm telling you, you can't just rely on that. The main thing is through the limud Torah. Why is the main hiskashrus to a Rebbe of Chabad through learning the Rebbe's Torah? It's very simple. Because when we learn the Rebbe's Torah, we become connected to the Rebbe in a way that is so incredibly deep. When you learn to make your brain work the way that a Lekutei Sichas brain works, the way an Igros Kodesh brain works, your life is a different life. You see everything different, and you can't go back from that. And wherever you go, there you are. Wherever you go, your connection to the Rebbe is there. Everything you experience. So your relationship with the Rebbe isn't the hour that you spent learning Chassidus. It's how that hour changes the way you'll experience every hour for the rest of your life. So when people talk about they meet the Rebbe and they were looking into the Rebbe's eyes, that's one thing. But the Rebbe gave Chassidim a special gift, which is the ability to look with the Rebbe's eyes. The Rebbe literally gave us eyes. This is what it means. That until this day, you didn't have a heart to know, you didn't have eyes to see. Whose eyes to see? So one way to say it is the Rebbe's eyes. Another way to say it is your real eyes. Wine Reb should speak to Wine Reb. Moshe Yitzchak Hecht has been sent to Moshe Yitzchak Hecht. Should I become? I should become. In other words, being a Makusher means being your true self. And being your true self means looking at life to the best of your ability through the eyes that the Rebbe gave you. Again, another London story. But I remember the first time that I was in this building, actually, was for my brother's wedding. And I remember on Shabbos, after davening, the Farbrengen, and I remember Rabbi Sudak, Olav Shalom, was in the basement. We were Farbrengen together, and that itself was an incredible experience. But I just want to share with you one thing, and probably everybody here knows this story, but I'll just share it with you anyways. When Rabbi Sudak went on Shlichus, so he would ask Rabbi Chadakov, can I go? Can I go? No, go learn. Go learn. And he'd ask again, can I go? No, go learn and go learn. And then it came a certain point, can I go? And Rabbi Chadakov said, yeah, you could go. So it's before Rabbi Sudak is going on Shlichus, and he's sitting, he's standing in the Rebbe's room, and he's asking the Rebbe, by the way, this is a young man who's devoting his... Okay, I think we say, the pioneers, the ones who forged the path, sometimes I think we don't understand the extent of that. Like today, when a younger man starts a Chabad house, before he arrives in his Makom HaShlichus, he knows the theme of his first 4 years of Purim parties, okay? Everything is done, everything's clear, he knows exactly what he's getting into. Rabbi Sudak is asking the Rebbe, he's committing his whole life. He's ready to go. And he says, by the way, when I get to London, what do I do there? Well, that's a real Nasa v'Nishma. I agreed to give my whole life to this. And by the way, I just want to check, what does that mean? What do I do when I get there? And the Rebbe answered him, Was soll ich dir sagen? The Rebbe sort of described it as the Rebbe sort of lifted up his hands, like as if he were exasperated, and he smiles and Was soll ich dir sagen? What do you want me to tell you? Like, what do you want? You want me to give you a list? That's not what the Rebbe said, but that was like the tone. Like, what do you want me to tell you? The Rebbe followed up and said, there are thousands of toisen ter Sachen. There are thousands of things to be done. You'll go there, keep your eyes open, you write a duch, and you'll do. I think it's an incredible story on many, many levels. First of all, the management style, or for most of us, the parenting style, just the opposite of micromanagement. The child asks, what should I do? And you don't enable them. You say, you know what? I've raised you. You are standing on your own 2 feet. And you don't just have deos, I believe you have das. And that's why before you went, every time you asked, is it time to go? And you were told, no, gay learn and go learn. What does go learn mean? Go learn means assimilate that information into your brain until it becomes yours. And when it gets to a point where I think that you know how to look at things, then I'm ready to send you. And then my only instruction to you is, I'm not going to make you a list of what to do. If I make you a list of what to do, I'm limiting you. If I'll write 1,000 things to do on a checklist, so you know what you'll do? You'll check off 1,000 things and you'll be done. No, I'm going to do much more than that. I'm going to tell you like this. Keep your eyes open and you'll see thousands of things. Not 1,000, thousands. In other words, what was the Rebbe say? I'm not giving you a list. Please, it doesn't work that way. I gave you eyes. You learned in my yeshiva, you have eyes. You can look at life like a chassid looks at life. Now just do me a favor, keep those eyes open. And when the Rebbe spoke about in the last years about Mashiach is already a reality, and we have to see it. What was the term that the Rebbe used? We have to open the eyes. What does that mean, open your eyes? It means you have years and years of chassidus that give us an approach to life, an approach to everything that comes up in life. Now, you were given eyes, open those eyes. Look at life the way a chassid of the Rebbe looks at life. Look at life from the Rebbe's perspective. And when you look at the world, don't see the world the way you ought to think that you should, based on your cheshbon. You know what? Stop it. Stop. You're getting hysterical. You're a chassid. Go train yourself how to think. It's all there. It's in the Maimorim. It's in the Sichos. It's in the Igros. And then go take another look at the world and see the world the way that Rebbe sees the world. See a gan. And it's not just a gan. It's the Eibishter's gan. Gani, Lignuni. And that Mashiach is ready to be here any second. And all we have to do for our part is open those eyes that the Rebbe gave us. So I just want to leave with a thought. Something that the Rebbe said, Parshas Chukas, about the stalkus of Aaron HaKohen. And we know that when Aaron was mourned, that the people grieved for him much more than they grieved for Moshe. And Chazal explained that the reason is because Aaron was a peacemaker. That when two people were fighting, Aaron would make peace between them. And how did he do it? What was his method? So he'd go to one guy and he would say like this, look, he really wants to make up with you, but he's embarrassed. But he wants to apologize to you. And then he would go to the other guy and say, by the way, he wants to apologize, but he's embarrassed. So each guy would think that the other guy was coming to make up with him. They would meet each other and they would hug. And before they figured out what happened, they'd be friends again. So Aaron was popular. That's why he was grieved even longer. He was popular because he was a peacemaker. So the Rebbe asks a simple question. Are you saying that Aaron played with the truth? He told a white lie? Takye, he can be Meshana the Emes, Mipnei HaSholem. But this is the greatness of Aaron? The Rebbe says like this. The truth is that the reason Aaron was beloved was because he told the truth. He told a higher truth. He told a truth about you that you didn't even know about yourself. See, when Aaron saw two people fighting, he knew that's just shtick. That's not the real you. That's your nefesh habamis. That's the guf. The real you isn't fighting with anybody. The real you is loving. The real you is tolerant. The real you is at peace. And you're out of touch with the real you. But Aaron didn't lose touch with the real you. He always saw the real you. So when he would go to your friend and report that you wanted to make shalom, he was talking to your friend about the real you because that's the you that Aaron saw. Not that he was saying a little deviation from the truth. Farker, the way that Rebbe explains it, he was saying the deepest truth. And that's why, when Aaron passed away, he was mourned especially. It was especially difficult for the Yidden. Because when the Yidden lost Aaron, what they experienced was the fear that they had thereby lost their true selves. That the one person who could see the real me and see past my shtick and know who I really am, and now where do I go to how do I have that relationship? So they weren't just grieving for Aaron, they were grieving for the loss of themselves. Their inner selves, their true selves. That's the way that Rebbe explains it. If we take a chagas approach, the thermometer approach, that we need to be in a particular environment or a particular setting, we need to be emotionally uplifted, and then we can feel the right feelings, then yeah, we're in trouble. But I'm not even going to dwell on that thought for a second, because it's the opposite of the truth. Because we're Chabad Chassidim, which means thermostat Chassidim, and Chassidim of a Chabad Rebbe, who teaches us who we are through his Torah, and continues to teach us, continues to guide us. I'm not even referring to all the spiritual things that Rebbe is doing that I have no concept of. I'm talking about simple b'das tachton, that in today's day, a younger man, a bacher, a balabas, sits down with a Likutei Sichos, and the same person who was confused and didn't know what to do about his problems and had questions, through straightening out your brain, through meeting your true self in the Rebbe's Torah, you leave and go forth into your life with clarity and with answers, and with someone who not only can pick himself up, but he can motivate and pick up his family and Mikuravim and everyone upon whom you have a hashpah. Because who is that? That's the real you. That's you when you're connected to the Rebbe. That's you when you're looking at life through the Rebbe's eyes. So we have a Rebbe. Yud Aleph Shevat is Kabbalas and Nesias. Not just that the Rebbe accepted the Nesias, but we were Makabel, that we accepted the Rebbe's Nesias upon ourselves. And that means on the Rebbe's terms, and the Rebbe said he's not going to do it for us, we got to do it for ourselves. He'll give us the tools, we have to use the tools. We have to learn how to make use of them. The tools is very simple. Geila Chukal is Kashas Eina Yachalas Biela. Kasher Leimid Maimori Chassidus Asher Amo Harav V'Kaisiv. The Rebbe gave us an opportunity to literally have a totally different reality. A godly reality, a real reality. And how to see things the way they really are. How to look at the world the way the world really is. How to look at Torah the way the Torah really is. Even to look at the Eibishter the way the Eibishter really is. What does Chassidus do for us? But I want to tell you the biggest chiddush of them all, and the one that we struggle with the most, and this is what I'm going to leave you with this thought and with this homework, because I'm not an inspirational speaker. The biggest chiddush of them all is that the Rebbe gave us eyes to finally look in the mirror and see our true selves. Chaim.